Please help me give big smooches to my guest, Rachel Lindsay.
Hello.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy to have you here. I've been watching you on the TV for years, and now you're here on Dates and Mates.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I know we're going to have a lot of fun.
We are going to have a lot of fun, and we better do it quick because, girl, you got to get back to work. Look, okay, y'all, Rachel, she is, you know her obviously from The Bachelorette. She's also a podcaster. She's a TV host. She's an attorney, no big deal. She's an author, and now she's a novelist. Rachel, first of all, why? Second of all, how? Did you write this fantastic new book in your spare time? Real love. It's an amazing feat.
Oh, I did it with help. And I like to be very upfront about that because I'm not the type of girl who's like, I can do it all. I balance, love and life and career. No, I fail at most things. And in order for me to do all those beautiful things that you just listed out, I have help, including with this book. So the idea that I had for Real Love, I really pitched it at the same time that I started talking about my nonfiction book, my book of essays. And they loved the idea. And then the rest is history. But when it came time to start really writing the book, I'd still be writing it. I'd probably still be on page one. So
I
shout out to
understand.
Alexa Martin, who totally not just helped me with it. We worked through this together, but also understanding the genre that I was in and how there's a certain formula to that genre. And it's like, I'm like, I want to do this. I want to say this. I want to say this. This character's going here. She's like, no, wait, you're in a particular genre. So I really learned a lot, not just about the process, but just about how all of this works and with books and particularly and with fiction. And so, yeah, it's been fun. And, I've had help.
We all need help. And as someone who's writing my first book right now,
Oh,
um, it,
congratulations.
thank you. It won't be out until January, but it's hard enough to write a nonfiction and then to go there and write a fiction piece that is a little bit, I would say,
Mhm.
inspired by your own experiences. How much of writing this book, which involves a woman going on a reality TV show to find love, how much of it was inspired by your experience on The Bachelor, and how many parallels are really in there, or did you take the liberties to make this its own sort of experience?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I definitely took liberty at making it its own experience. I wanted it to stand alone. But what I did want, I mean, the idea came from my own life experience of my coworkers knocking on the door saying, "Hey, you should be on The Bachelor." Me laughing and saying, "Oh, that's not for Black people." And they're like, "No, it'll be great for you. You'll do fantastic." And I said, "Yes." But that was not a strong yes. I was really looking for no's, and I was just looking for something to say, "No, stay where you are because you're comfortable here. You know this life, and it's all a part of your plan." And so once I said yes, it changed my life in the best way. But I always think about that girl who almost said no. And so I wanted to
Mm.
explore that. So you do get a lot of where I was in my life at that time, certain things that I dealt with personally, the crossroads that I was at, which I feel will make it very relatable to the reader because we all go through that, whether it's in love, life, family, friendships. And you see the protagonist, Maya, go through all that. So Maya, who is more based off of me, says no to going on the show, but at the same time, she watches her friend Delilah say yes to the experience. So it's great because it's a story within a story, and you're seeing a certain, even though it's not the focal point, you're seeing her go through this life on reality television. Meanwhile, she stays on her life plan path. It's really interesting to see what
Mm.
happens.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the exploration of the road not taken. I think about
Hmm.
that all the time,
All
the
the
sliding
time.
doors moments, right? And like all of those little micro decisions that you make that lead you on the path. I imagine you couldn't have even back in the day when your coworkers were telling you you should apply for The Bachelor, and you you thought it wasn't something for you, I'm sure you couldn't have even really pictured this life that you're living right now.
Oh my gosh, not even close. I mean, I was like, okay, I'm going on The Bachelor to escape. It was really escapism. I was open to love. I'm too skeptical to believe that it could actually happen. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to do this and figure out, what does Rachel really want? This is my first time being rebellious. I am saying yes to something in a selfish way, despite what anybody else says. This is for me. And I was going to take this time to detach from TV and my phone and the internet and all of that, to just focus on my wants and desires. And never did I think, well, I never thought I would win, right? Win, or the guy would choose me. And he didn't. So that was the only truth. But I went a lot farther than I thought I would. I made these amazing friendships that I still have to this day. And I just figured out exactly who I was and what I wanted. Because those moments where you're talking to producers really are therapy, even though they're trying to produce a show. So I got all of
Mm.
that. And then, got the offer to be the Bachelorette, and I said yes to it. And I didn't think that I'd find love. And, that just took me by surprise too. And then it just opened me up to a whole other world where I've been able to explore and things and have certain experiences that I never thought I'd have, and meet amazing people and just live the life that I want to live, that makes me happy and brings me joy, rather than just doing what, I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. Having been through that experience, and on the show, I'm always talking to people about doing that self work, getting that clarity on what you want, putting that time into really figuring out yourself before you move into a partnership. Now you're on the other side. You and Brian have been married 4 years. Is that right?
Almost 3.5. Yes. Yes.
3.5
Yes.
years. Congratulations. That
Thank
is
you.
certainly a Bachelor Nation that you're on the leaderboard there.
Thank you.
So but this is your life. We watch it as a show, but this is your life.
Yeah.
What do you feel like now that you're in the relationship, that you have learned about yourself? And
Mhm.
do any of these themes show up in your novel, in Real Love?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but I will say that what I've learned about myself, well, and this is part of the book, is that it's going to be okay, because I know that I was the one who was stopping myself from doing some of the things that I really wanted in life, even having some of the things that I wanted. I would blame it on my job. I blame it on my career of what I have to do. No, like, I have to get to this point as being a lawyer, and then this is the next step, and this is the next step, and then I can enjoy this. And so, yes, that's definitely a theme within the book. But I learned that, life is about taking risks. And sometimes you're going to fail. And then sometimes they will beautifully surprise you in the best way, which I feel like I'm a living testament to that. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that it's just, the more I talk to people, it's another reason I wanted to write this book and explore this in a fictional way, is fear. I know you said money's the root of all evil. Sometimes I say jealousy is, sometimes I say insecurity is, but I really think it's fear. Think of the things that we would do if we weren't scared of it. If we would just fearlessly went after those things and not worried about the unknown or the consequences on the other side of it, if we just went for it. And so that's a huge theme in this book. And that's truly something that I've learned for myself as I've experienced not just love, but just even certain things in career, just going for it. So yeah, I would definitely say that that's what I learned about myself. One of the things that I've learned about myself.
I would totally co-sign that. Fear is the root of all
Yeah.
evil. And yeah, I find myself a lot of times with clients just saying, what if? If you weren't afraid, what would you do? What would it look
Such a good
like?
question.
Right? And sometimes we get stuck in our heads, and we play forward the tape, and we think this is how it's going to go, and that
Hmm.
stops us from action, but the real discovery is in the action. So you took a bold move in your life,
Yeah.
and look how it's played out for you. I love how even in
It's been good.
in your series of essays, your book from last year, Miss Me With That, your series of
Hmm.
essays, I love how you even have like what you thought your life was going to be. And
Yes.
by 27 I'm married, and by 29 I start the first of my 4 kids.
Yep. Yep. And look at me now.
We design it. So was there a point where you were like, "Okay, I'm going to rewrite the 10-year plan," or do you have a different philosophy now?
Yeah, there is no life plan. I got rid of it. And I'm so glad you brought that up because it's true. I go through like age 18, 25, 27, and I mean, I had it down to a T. This is exactly what is going to happen. And if you don't fit in, goodbye. And I even had that list for my man. My man was going to be a certain way. So now, I mean, I have the man now, but what I would say is I would rip, if you have a list for either one, life plan, man, whatever it may be, I would rip it up. And what I would say is hold true to those things that you don't want to compromise on. Your morals, your values, your dreams, your goals, all that, should stand, through and through. But the life plan, even now, when someone says to me, what is it that you want to do? What's the end goal? I don't give them one because I have been in these last 6, almost 7 years that my life has changed. Nothing, even when I came off The Bachelor, I was like, okay, it didn't work for me, but I really like getting to know this entertainment world. Maybe I'll step more into entertainment law and sports. Like I wasn't even thinking Bachelorette. Because I told them no at first. That's how I was thinking, and it's been so much bigger than that. And so I feel like when you write down a life plan, you feel like you have to stick to it. That you miss out on other opportunities. So now I just say I want to do things that I'm passionate about and that are purposeful. And that's it. And that has never failed me. I won't be dissatisfied with it because it'll mean something to me, whatever it is that I'm doing. And that's how I apply that to every aspect of my life.
Yeah, it's good to focus in on the qualities and the values. That's what I tell people are really the big predictors of long-term compatibility, the values. And sometimes we do get too locked into this one vision of what we want. But I ask what happens when you get into the feeling of how you want to feel when you're in that relationship. You don't know when it's coming. You don't know if it's going to hit all of the boxes on the list. I hate the list, Rachel. I'm ripping up lists every day here. But we don't put like how we want to feel in the relationship on the list. We put he's this tall,
Mhm.
he makes this much money, he has this job, he drives this car,
So
and
shallow.
none of those things. But, some of it is how we've been conditioned, right? It's
Yes.
through reading fairy tales and seeing rom-coms and watching The Bachelor, and we get these
Mhm.
ideas in our head, but they're not necessarily our dreams, they're someone else's dreams. And that's another thing that I really love
Yes.
about this book is that it kind of shows what happens when you follow your own dreams and are
Mhm.
open to redefining them.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of, and this is kind of explored in the book when you see the family dynamic, and this is was true to my life as well. Our parents come from a different generation. For them, employment and work was to survive, and it was, to put food on the table, as opposed to our generation is more like, well, how does this job make me feel, and what brings me joy and happiness? And I just think that's a much more beautiful place to be. But our parents force, the way that they were taught and the way they lived on us. And so you feel like you have to do that and live that life. And it was therapy and going into my and breaking up in a bad, like ending a bad relationship, therapy, and turning into 30, where I just really woke up one day and I was like, whose life am I living? Who am I doing this for? Am I doing this for me, or am I doing this to please somebody else? When I honestly answered that question, I realized I was not doing life the way that I wanted to. And so I started to do it that way. And it hasn't failed me yet. It hasn't always been easy, but it hasn't failed me yet.
Yeah, when we examine those stories and those belief systems, it gets murky in there,
Oof.
right? Because they're so deeply seated. And you're right, this is
Mhm.
a very different way from our parents' generation. And I can't wait for my daughter to tell me about how everything I taught her
What do you mean?
is
Mine would
incorrect.
never.
I can't wait. She's 12 now, so I'm sure as
She's
soon
on
as
her
she
way.
turns 13, I
Yep.
will know nothing anymore. But But it is really interesting examining the our our programming and the origins. There was something you said earlier, Rachel, you when you were talking about not wanting to apply for the Bachelor, and you
Mhm.
said that's not something for black people. I think that's what you
Mhm.
said.
Yeah.
And I I noticed, and maybe it's because I'm black, I noticed a very deliberate choice to make the lead character in Real Love, Maya, black. And I think even
Yes.
her mom is like an African American studies
Mhm. Mhm.
professor, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a very deliberate choice.
Yeah.
And I I'm just wondering if there was something in the novel setting where you could explore race and how that factors into finding love in today's world, that maybe you couldn't say in the essays or you couldn't really say on the show.
I'm so glad that you said that because, um, yes, with when you're writing a nonfiction s- piece or about yourself, you don't. It's a fine line of telling too much information about somebody else and someone else's story, and you want to make sure that you're telling your truth, but you're telling your story and not and like being fair to the other person. At least that was me. I was trying to be polite, but in fiction. You don't know who I'm talking about. And if you think that that's about you, that's your fault because this is a fiction novel. Okay. That's not my fault that you see some of yourself in that. So absolutely. This was a way to explore some of that. And it was very deliberate to make Maya a black woman because, she is loosely based off of me and saying no and saying no and, and exploring a life that could have been. And also, it was deliberate to make Delilah, her friend, a Latina woman because she was the first on this show, Real Love, in her own right. But it was important also to not make her the focal point and not make the show because it was really about Maya's journey and exploring that. So it's telling that story within it, but also still making sure it was very much so about Maya and how Maya navigates life as a Black woman being in a male dominated, mostly white career, but also having a very diverse friend group. Sometimes her friends don't always understand certain things that she's going through. She was supposed to date a certain guy, and you feel that pressure in life and also from her family of who she was supposed to be with. But then, as she comes to a certain crossroads and she's open to new opportunities, you see her, if she had a list, which she kind of does, you see that certain things that are happening to her or she's experiencing that she's interested in don't necessarily match up with the list. But is she going to act on them or is she not? And that's a very real life situation, especially when you're someone like Maya, who's type A and has everything planned out. That unknown is the scariest place to be. But when you do step into it, it also might be the most rewarding.
Mm. I cannot relate to that whatsoever. No. Yes, I understand. You're speaking my language. And just going back to the question of race and I'm not don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to like tattletale on the Bachelor or anything.
Oh.
But I've heard you say that even, in the public eye, your blackness was always questioned.
Mhm.
And I I have for TV shows I've worked on where I've worked with black women, there's also this pressure of feeling like whoever I choose, that's like I'm representing
Right.
everyone, like everybody black. This is for this is for
Right.
everyone. And if I choose someone of another race, is that saying something about black women? Is that saying something about me?
Mhm.
Can can you unpack that for me a little bit in your
Yeah.
experience?
I mean, particularly for being the Bachelorette, it was I didn't think about much about how big of a deal it was being the first Black Bachelorette. I knew it was, and I knew it was history, but because I didn't watch the show, I didn't have a lot of context, so I didn't get wrapped up in the fanfare of it all. But what I did know is that I was going to be judged for every decision that I made but by this Bachelor audience, but then also by my own people. I know that they were going to be looking at me. Who is she going to choose? Why is she going to choose this person? There were already going to be assumptions about who I was going to choose. And I had to make a decision from the moment that I said yes, that I was going to ignore all of that. And I was going to be open to love. And if it came my way, I was going to accept it no matter what package it came in. And I needed to be okay with that because I knew the world that I was going to have to face once I made that decision. And it is something that I feel like if you aren't Black, and I can't speak towards other races, so I'm just going to speak in Black and white. If you aren't Black, you don't really necessarily understand how your culture will hold you to a specific standard and expect certain things from you. And whether that's like a generational trauma thing, whether that's something that we put, within ourselves and our own culture, we do that. And I knew that that was going to happen. And it did happen. And to be honest, it still happens. I still get questioned about my Blackness and certain things because I chose somebody who wasn't Black. And there are a lot of people who judge me for that and think that every decision that I make is not rooted in Blackness because my decision in love wasn't, which I think is completely unfair. I don't know if I'm unpacking it the way that you wanted me to, but it's definitely something that I feel like it's interesting. Going into the Bachelor world, Bachelor Nation, the Bachelor clan, as I like to call them, they have certain
Is
stereotypes of
that
Black
clan with a
people.
C or a K? No.
It's a K. It's a K.
Okay. Okay, just checking.
There are certain stereotypes that they had for me. And I know that I was chosen for a reason, right? I know that they saw my resume and I checked certain boxes for them. And they said, okay, if we're going to have a first, it's going to be her because she makes sense to this audience. They can easily accept her. It makes sense. She's a lawyer. Her dad's a judge. She went to private school. Okay, she's a good one. They didn't say that, but they were saying that. Why was I? Oh, so there was a certain stereotype that I felt like I fit in to be chosen to do that. What they weren't ready for is that I am that, but I am also a Black woman who's always going to represent herself as a Black woman who's going to call out certain things that contradict that, which I did. But on what I don't think I knew it would happen, but I wasn't as ready for is that, and I should know this because of how I grew up, and I talk about this in my book of essays of how I was constantly teased. But at the same time, Black people stereotype Black people, and we have certain expectations of what is our definition of Blackness. And we constantly say to non-Black people, hey, we're not monolithic, but then we don't have that same standard towards our own people within our own community. We forget, hey guys, we're not all the same. We have different experiences, but it doesn't take away from my Blackness. So I feel like this was something for the first time publicly I dealt with on the show, obviously dealt with it my entire life. And I sadly still deal with it at times.
So, for anyone listening who may be considering an interracial relationship, maybe open to it, but haven't had the opportunity. I write a lot, having a multiracial background myself. I write a lot about interracial relationships, and my parents went through a lot.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say how many years ago, to date myself, but a while ago. And in many ways, I think we're still in the same place that we were.
Mhm.
It's certainly better. But is there are there things that you should consider that, like, anything that you've encountered that was really unexpected beyond on the show, anything that you think might be helpful for people
Yeah.
that are bridging that cultural divide?
Yeah, absolutely. What I found interesting, so Brian and I met in 2017, got married in 2019, 2020, bam, we dealt with the pandemic. We dealt with this racial awakening. And what I found so interesting were how many people that were in interracial relationships who hadn't had conversations about race. And so now, for the first time ever, that race is so at the forefront, and we're watching these protests and our politicians and organizations and shows address race for the first time. You're realizing that your partner doesn't necessarily think the same way that you do. And couples were breaking up, interracial couples were breaking up left and right over saying, "Oh my God, I didn't know he thought like that." So my advice would be, and I definitely did this with Brian, I need you to know who I am, what I believe, and I want to know that same thing for you. It's not just about me. And you have to have these conversations of what it looks like to blend these two worlds together, and how we might perceive it one way, family might perceive it another way, and the world might perceive it something different. And should we have children, how our children may look, how they'll navigate the world, how we might see them one day, but when they step outside of our home, this is how the world will perceive them. It's so important to have those conversations. And I can't stress that enough, as you would if two religions were coming together. It's just that important. So I would just say my biggest advice is talk to one another and understand one another, because it's so important that you have the same foundation, because the world isn't always going to be for you, and you need to be able to
Mm.
fight against it together.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway, right? Is that when you're in partnership, no matter what you're dealing with, we've already established
Mhm.
this is a new era. So we're doing it
Right.
our way to make ourselves happy. But yeah, your partner's got to be on your team. And as somebody who's been married almost 16 years,
Oh,
I found,
congratulations.
thank you. I found that we've talked about a lot of things over the years. And there was a big conversation when we had kids about how our kids would identify and how they'd be
Mhm.
defined. I've talked about it ad nauseum on the show, so that's it for another that's for another episode. But there were more conversations that came up certainly during the time of the protests and
Yeah.
the what do they call it? The racial reckoning that was happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think an openness to continuing to have that conversation because it's
Yeah,
going to keep evolving as we keep evolving.
absolutely.
That's how it goes. That's how it goes. Rachel, I it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I could
Same.
talk to you all day. I hope you will come back
Yes,
on Dates and Mates
I'd
again.
love to.
But in the meantime, everybody, you got to pick up Rachel's new book, Real Love. It's a fantastic novel. And while you're at it, you might as well get the bundle and get her
Yeah.
essay book, Miss Me With That. Get a twofer, and then you can get both the fiction and the nonfiction uh, version of this story. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has really been fun.